Hello, everyone. Welcome to Reverend Matt's Monster Science. It's Thursday at 8 o'clock, the Cheers time slot, because I am very old. So thank you for tuning in. As usual, I will not be able to see your comments in the chat until the very end. Feel free to chat amongst yourselves, but I won't be able to see anything until it's all over, and then we'll have the Q&A. And as usual, please feel free and encouraged to donate. There should be a donate button right below the screen here if you scroll down, and then I'm Matthew Kesson on Venmo, and if you have my email address, then you can use that on PayPal as well. So, let's begin. Hi, I'm Reverend Matt, and today we're going to talk about the monsters at the end of the world. The real, proper, hugely supernatural ends of the world, where there are dragons and giant wolves and the stars are falling from the sky. I mean, in reality, if even one star fell from the sky, it would envelop the earth all on its own. But people in the olden days did not know this. They imagined something else, something we will be getting to. We're not talking about bad things happen and we're sad. We're talking about the sun became as black as sackcloth and the moon became as blood. I remember that from Ghostbusters. We're talking about the real deal. And of course, we, for this show, will be focusing on the monsters of such events. People love a good apocalypse. A lot of people can't get a paper cut without concluding that this is the ringing down of the age of humanity. And according to the discipline of eschatology, which is the formal study of both religious apocalypses and spiritual ideas about individual death, this is because Armageddon and the fear of one's own death are essentially the same thing psychologically, which sounds a little selfish on the surface of it. When I die, it is exactly like if everything that has ever existed dies. But there is a kind of sense to it. Every death is, in fact, the end of a perceptual world, the end of an entire set of memories and experiences, and what the world is. And no matter how much empathy you have, how much perspective, all you really know about the world is your own senses and recollection of it. When you're gone, the world is gone, so far as you are aware. This being the case, though, it is worth mentioning that obsession with the apocalypse is a very Christian concept. Indeed, we get the word apocalypse from the Bible. It means revelation. And we also get Armageddon from it, a reference to the valley of Megiddo, where it all starts, apparently. Avoid the valley of Megiddo, I guess, is the moral of that. I don't care how good the restaurants are. Many religions have an end of the world, but none of them go about it like Christianity does, which does fit with the eschatology, because though many people practice it differently these days, Christianity can be a very death-focused religion. 100% of the consequences of morality happen after you die. That is what you are focused on. And its symbol is a man who has been executed, or at least the device of that execution. And so it fits that it would have much to say about the end of all things. Though it is still remarkable for it. There are other death-obsessed religions. The ancient Egyptians built huge, giant buildings to put dead people in them. They put cats in there because dead people like cats. And in the modern day, I have learned to include cats in these presentations as often as possible. But the old Egyptian apocalypse was nothing much at all. Merely the statement that one day the universe would return to the chaos from which it had been born. And this low level of dramatic tension was more or less the global default before the Lamb of Hosts came along. So, let's start with that apocalypse, which is perhaps the most bananas one of all. Now, before we begin, I'm not a Christian man, but I do know of many people who have benefited greatly from the religion, not the least of whom being Johnny Cash, who needed it. So I do not mean to mock, but the biblical apocalypse. Okay, you know the part on the other end when the first woman is created physically by removing a rib from the first man and making her out of that? That's not medically true, you know? Let's not believe that that's something that happened some morning. And Armageddon Armageddon is like that, except the rib is also made out of pure gold, and it flies into the sky and catches on fire, and then there are 20 earthquakes, and if you need to take it literally, you might not like the next part of this talk. Okay. Armageddon is laid out in the final book of the New Testament, the book of the Revelation of St. John the Divine, whose name is perhaps a little redundant. Maybe John the extremely profane wasn't really a candidate for sainthood in the first place. This book starts with the Jesus appearing to John and saying that he is going to tell him about the future, but starts off with a whole bunch of stuff about which contemporary churches he is happy with and which ones he is not, which all is of great interest to really hardcore biblical historians and also to such people as nobody who has ever been alive. After a couple of chapters of this, we visit God in his throne in heaven, and we hear about this. And in the midst of the throne and round about the throne were 4 beasts full of eyes before and behind. And the first beast was like a lion, and the second beast was like a calf, and the third beast had a face as a man, and the fourth beast was like a flying eagle. And the 4 beasts had each of them 6 wings about him, which, by the way, must have been frustrating for the eagle. Oh, okay, everyone gets wings. That's great. And they were full of eyes within, and they rest not day and night, saying, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty. So, that's weird. All of this is, of course, deeply symbolic. Here in particular, the eyes within point to it being symbolism. It seems unlikely that we are meant to understand that the 4 beasts are able to look at their own internal organs. It would be dark. Unless we're also meant to understand that they have lighting of some sort inside them as well, but that would be ridiculous. But what exactly is symbolized here is a matter of some debate, as it will be for most of the creatures of this book, save for a few really obvious ones. Perhaps they are a metaphor for something going on politically at the time of this writing. There's a lot of that in Revelation. Or perhaps they mean any number of groups of 4, depending on who you ask. The 4 seasons, the 4 cardinal directions, the 4 classical elements, the 4 monkeys, the 4 new monkeys from 1987. The list goes on, and we will not get into all of it here, save to note that Mike Nesmith is the lion one. Primary among these correspondents, though, is the Tetramorph, which sounds like somebody the Power Rangers fight, but which is, in fact, 4 animals representing the 4 evangelists, the writers of the first 4 books of the New Testament. Matthew is the human, Mark is the lion, Luke is the ox, or the calf in this case, and John is the eagle. This is borne out here by the behavior of the beasts, who just kind of hang around in heaven worshiping God, and whatever you may think of this, it is not what we are looking for in our apocalyptic monsters, and so we will move on. Unfortunately, our next weird creature is also disappointing from a badass monster violence perspective. It is written, In the midst of the throne and of the 4 beasts, and in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb as it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes. Awesome, but Jesus. This is Jesus, the Nazarene, associated with baby sheep in some part because of implicit gentleness, though real baby sheep can in fact be real bastards, but more so because at the time, lambs were a very popular sacrifice because God really needed lambs because he had quite a lot of Pinot Noir and needed something to go with it. And Jesus, of course, was the ultimate sacrifice, releasing us from the need to sacrifice all those lambs so that we could have them for ourselves for kebabs. Finally, though, we get to the action. And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were, the noise of thunder, one of the 4 beasts saying, Come and see. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. The first of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, who are much better than the 4 unicyclists of the apocalypse. I think they do a lot of juggling. And we all know about the 4 horsemen, but already here in the Bible, we have a problem. Which one is this? Sounds like it's conquest, and that has been an interpretation, but he has also been interpreted as being Christ and also as the Antichrist. And they say the Bible is open to interpretation, but wow, that's kind of a range. Once we've seen the other three, it becomes clear that this one is, according to the modern popular arrangement, pestilence. But there's nothing whatsoever about that here. Disease has nothing to do with crowns or bows, and it seems like post-biblical writers just filled in a thing that they thought was bad, and disease was an awfully good choice, especially since they didn't have Nickelback yet. The other four are more straightforward. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword. So that's war. And lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. This one's taken to be famine, reasonably enough, but to be honest, it also sounds just a whole lot like capitalism. And finally, behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over a 4th part of the earth to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. And everyone should count their blessings that they did not also include the beasts of Mars. And so here they are, the horsemen. It is time to start producing heavy metal albums, and here in the story is where all hell breaks loose, more or less literally, for the single time in history. And in terms of the narrative, which from this point forward is mostly just bad stuff happening in a generally random and non-sequential fashion. It's almost impossible to follow, but who cares? Look at some of the stuff in it. For instance, the next monsters arrive when a bottomless pit opens, and out come the demon locusts, here to torment for 5 months those who lack the seal of God, no, on their foreheads, and they are described thusly. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were, as it were, crowns of gold, and their faces were as the faces of men. And they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions. And they had breastplates, as it were, breastplates of iron, and their sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running into battle. And they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. Okay, none of that is locusts. Not one part of that is locusts. In the margins of the used King James Bible I own, somebody had here written, helicopter? Also no, this is not the part of the Bible in which a bottomless pit opens and then helicopters come out. But this does highlight something that people have been doing with the story for over 1,000 years, deciding that its incomprehensible symbolism corresponds to their exact present circumstances, that it refers to their present. It's outrageously myopic to do this, just on the surface of it. And the more so when you look at how people have always done this, and hence always been wrong. It is added that these creatures had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon, which is awfully multicultural for the place and time. It is also around this point that 200,000 horsemen show up, which is 200 million, but one does get the sense that they may as well have just said 1100 kabillion hojillion. Regardless, enough horsemen to meet your horseman needs, especially when you consider that the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. Also, their tails were like unto serpents, and had heads, and with them they do hurt. So, these guys kill a bunch of guys. This is like killing a bunch of guys part of the book, and this is obviously bad, but it's also God doing it at this point. He's gotten all Old Testament again. It's the angels opening the seals and loosing the horsemen. Abaddon is an angel of the pit. Times are hard. That's chapter 9. Over in chapter 12, we get another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. The distribution of the horns and the crowns among the heads is not recorded. Maybe they were all on one head. It goes on. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. It doesn't say for how long he did this. Maybe for days, weeks. Creepy, 7-headed dragon. Creepy. Also probably boring. Then, later in the chapter we hear, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil. So there we go. Simple enough for a change. Except for one thing. This is all supposed to be a vision of the future, of the end of the world, and the fall of Lucifer from heaven happening now. Well, it just seems late. But then are you on time for everything? Cut the author of all lies some slack. So, this is getting exciting. We are practically playing a guitar solo on a mountain top, but there is more to come. Chapter 13. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns. This kind of thing apparently being fashionable at the time. And upon his heads the name of blasphemy, which was Jeff. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth the mouth of a lion. So, he blasphemes a bunch, and everyone worships him and the dragon, and he is in power for 42 months, or 3.5 years. Make of that what you will, or better yet, don't. Then, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. And this one causes people to worship the other beast. He is the assistant to the regional beast of the apocalypse. And he doeth great wonders, as that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. He had fireworks, apparently. Sometimes impressing people is not that hard. This is all pretty redundant, but it is worth noting that this latter one is taken to be a metaphor for the Antichrist, who is the opposite of Christ. Where Christ is kind, the beast is cruel. Where Christ is a servant, the beast is a master. Where Christ likes Bewitched, the beast likes I Dream of Jeannie, and so on. This is indicated here by the lamb's horns we have heard about, a mockery of Jesus as the lamb. Of the beast we also hear, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark on their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save that he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let he that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So, this is 666, the number of the beast. This is where that comes from. What exactly it is supposed to mean is debated, ultimately unclear, and resolves practically to be essentially meaningless, really. But that doesn't prevent a lot of teenagers from carving it into their desks at school. So, that's the heavy hitters. The 4 horsemen and the 7-headed dragon, Satan, and the Antichrist as beast of the apocalypse, and also beast of the apocalypse middle management in there as well. That last one, the beast with all the heads, reappears in chapter 17, or maybe it's another beast with the same number of heads and horns and all that sort of thing, but that seems unlikely. Now, he is the mount of the whore of Babylon, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. Now, as with the dragon, the symbolism is made plain, though again somewhat unhelpfully. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, we are told. And the horns are kings, and the horns hate the whore of Babylon, who is the actual city of Babylon. And if no one's really following this, we can only assume that the writers are maybe fine with that. This is prophecy, after all, not meant to be clear-cut, and indeed one could argue that this is actually a very effective literary representation of the world falling into chaos. It remains true, though, that the revelation of St. John the Divine is a good read because of all the crazy awesome stuff that appears in it, rather than because you've learned anything or that it's a coherent whole. It's like a Iron Maiden album. So, that's the official policy statement by Christianity on the topic of the end of all things. But much of what we know about Christianity is essentially folkloric and post-biblical. For example, this with the dragon here is about a third of all the mentions in the Bible of the devil. He's not a major character, though of course he is extremely important to Christianity as she is played. And there are apocalyptic versions of this phenomenon as well. Just one moment. The Bible does mention Leviathan, the dragon that is in the sea. In the book of Job, he is used as an example of powers beyond human opposition, most famously with the line, "Canst thou draw out Leviathan with a hook?" Nope. It goes on, "Canst thou put a hook into his nose, or bore his jaw through with a thorn," which are fishing techniques that I was not aware of. "Wilt thou play with him as a bird?" Honestly, I hadn't even thought of that. "His scales are his pride, shut up together as with a close seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them." It's normal for scales, God, come on now. But then there's a lot about Leviathan's fire-breathing and hugeness and teeth and such, and it is all super scary, and that's terrific. But it takes post-biblical sources to put him in Armageddon. In spite of all this power, Leviathan would be killed at the end of the world by his land-bound counterpart Behemoth in some stories, and by God himself in others. In one case, having God afterwards feed his flesh to the righteous in a tent made out of Leviathan's own skin. Kind of like an Oktoberfest. The serpent that rests at the bottom of the sea awaiting Armageddon proved a popular motif. Lignapeist was a vast serpentine Irish dragon, old as time, too powerful for St. Patrick, but put to the bottom of low foil by St. Murrow. His stirrings down there cause strange tides and currents in that bay, and when Armageddon comes, he will finally awaken and rise and lay waste to the land. And one doesn't mean to look forward to the end of all things, but like so much of this, that does sound totally amazing. A lake in Iceland, which I am choosing to pronounce Lagarfljót, which is almost certainly wrong, has a serpent called the Scrimsel at the bottom of it, cast there by Bishop Gudmund, also awaiting apocalypse. Not a lot of lakes can boast this. One wonders if there were an apocalypse serpent at the bottom of, say, Lake Harriet in Minneapolis, whether property values would go down, or, indeed, up, and so on. This is the apocalypse, possibly the biggest one of all. As we have said, it is nearly unique. The ancient Greeks had none at all. The Egyptians and the Celts mentioned it almost as an afterthought, but there was one other Western culture that also couldn't get enough of the end of days, and this was, of course, the Norsemen and their Ragnarok. Ragnarok, the doom of the gods, the end of the world when the earth would shake and the stars would fall from the sky and chaos would overcome the well-organized. The Norse were very into this. It was a major theme, and indeed in some characterizations of Odin, the All-Father is obsessed with it, wandering the world in disguise, seeking means to prepare for it or forestall it. Folly, of course, because the end of the world is inevitable. Towards the beginning of Ragnarok, the earth shakes, and the mountains fall, and the trees are uprooted, which is maybe not as impressive as that with the mountains, but nobody here has written any sagas, so we can all just shut up. And then the monsters start showing up. Ragnarok had some of the best monsters possible. 3 of them were the children of Loki and the goddess Angerboda. All 3 of these creatures were prophesied to bring utter disaster to the gods, though this is where their family resemblance ended. And so the gods dealt with each of them in a different way. Fenrir was the one of the 3 who had it the best, at least at first. The gods brought this giant wolf to Asgard and raised him there themselves, and none of the old stories tell us exactly why. And indeed, once they got Fenrir to Asgard, everyone was afraid of him, with only the god Tyr courageous enough to feed him. And Fenrir, of course, ate prodigiously, growing larger and larger every day. And so the gods were all like, wait, why did we even do this in the first place? And then they all sort of shifted from foot to foot and avoided eye contact with each other. But then eventually, someone hatched a plan. The gods constructed a fetter, a dog chain for Fenrir named Lading. My dog's chain is named Stephen. They brought it to the wolf and suggested that it might be a fun game for them to put it on him and then he could try to break out of it. Well, that did sound like a lot of fun and not at all suspicious. And moreover, Fenrir did know his own strength and judged the fetter, Lading was its name, to be no threat to him. And so he let them fasten it to him and he kicked it off immediately. And yes, it had been a lot of fun. So the Aesir made a second fetter, twice as strong, named Dromi. Fenrir was more reluctant to play their game this time, as this one was clearly much stronger. But they told him that he would achieve great fame were he to overcome it. And this, of course, worked, because if there's one thing wolves want, it is to be famous. You go to any bus station in Hollywood, and you'll see the freshly arrived, bright-eyed ingenue wolves. So, again, Fenrir allowed himself to be chained, and this time he had to strain against the fetter mightily. But once again he prevailed, sending pieces of it flying off into the distance. Well, obviously the gods had a problem, so they went down to Svartalfheim and commissioned the Svartalfar, the dwarves, to make a really top-notch fetter. And so they fashioned Gleipnir, which appeared as a mere ribbon, but which was the strongest fetter ever created. So, the Aesir brought Fenrir to the island Lyngvi in the lake Amsvartnir, and there challenged him again. Well, Fenrir wasn't going for it this time, reasoning that he would gain no fame for breaking a ribbon, and moreover that having the third fetter look weak and frail was maybe a trick of some kind. Norse mythology, where the wolves are smarter than the gods. Well, the gods started telling him that he would look like a coward if he refused, and he may have been smart, but he was still a bit of a bro, and so he consented on one condition: that one of the gods put their hand in his mouth as a pledge that Fenrir would be set free after the little game. And after a couple of rounds between the gods of, no, you do it, the god Tyr put his hand in Fenrir's mouth. The fetter was secured. The wolf realized that he was unable to break it. No move was made to free him. He realized he had been betrayed, and that about wrapped it up for Tyr's right hand. Nevertheless, the gods tied Gleipnir, the fetter, to a cord named Gelgia, tied it around a stone slab named Gjol, and anchored it to the ground with a rock named Thviti. And are you kidding me right now? For all this, Fenrir still rushed at them, mouth wide, and so they stuck a sword in his mouth, pommel in the lower jaw and point in the upper, bracing it open. And this, then, was the fate of Fenrir, tied by a ribbon to a rock on an island where everything has a name except the sword holding his mouth open. And the Aesir, no doubt, felt pretty good about all this, and probably went home and had a nice celebratory dinner, later picking their teeth with toothpicks named Tiffany and Lauren. Well, funny on them, because tricking an impossibly powerful god wolf into getting chained up and then leaving it there alive for eternity turned out to have a downside. At Ragnarok, all fetters are broken, including Fenrir's seemingly unbreakable one. He tears forth in fury, and understandably so, of all the monsters who surge forth at Ragnarok to kill the gods. Fenrir was the one who had a reason. His upper jaw is touching the sky, his lower is touching the earth, flames coming from his eyes and nostrils, and he meets Odin himself in battle. And the battle is obviously a mighty one, and Odin obviously fights valiantly, but in the end, it is for naught. In the end, he is swallowed by the wolf. Then Odin's son Vidar engages Fenrir, putting one foot on his lower jaw and taking hold of his upper, tearing him apart and killing him, much as King Kong does with a Tyrannosaurus in the original movie. And since Ragnarok occurs in the future, that means Vidar got the idea from Kong. We are told, by the way, that Vidar's foot, holding down Fenrir's jaw, is shod in a shoe for which the material had been collected throughout all time. It is a shoe that took a very long time to make. That's great. One thing that happens at Ragnarok before all this is that Fenrir devours the sun. That's probably important. Though, in some versions of this, it is not Fenrir who does this, but rather his son Skoll, no relation, who is also a wolf, which I feel is important to point out since Fenrir's own parents are, of course, absolutely not wolves. Skoll has been chasing the sun for ages, and his brother, also a wolf, has been chasing the moon. This brother has the rather impressive name of Hati Hrodvitnisson of the New Haven Hrodvitnissons, this surname being a reference to another name for Fenrir, Hrodvitnir, meaning Fame Wolf, because apparently that with the second fetter worked out okay. The second child of Angrboda and Loki was Jormungand, the Midgard serpent, born an unpleasant snake and also prophesied to be the doom of the gods. Rather than bring it to Asgard and be nervous about it, they just straight up threw it into the sea. Again, weak problem solving, but at least this time they didn't take elaborate measures to make it as angry as possible before tucking it away. There, the monster grew and grew and grew until he encircled the whole world and took his own tail in his mouth. And there he lay, at the bottom of the sea, encircling the world. Well, Thor wasn't going to stand for that, and I don't know why my talk about Viking legend has come to have such a strong male modeling thread, but here we are, and he would come into a number of conflicts with the colossal reptile. In one story, Thor is challenged to a fishing contest over a giant pot that the gods have sent him to get so that they could brew mead in it, because these are stories about religion. Thor hooks Jormungand and almost reels him in until his fishing contest opponent, a giant named Hymir, cuts Thor's fishing line, preventing the serpent from being unleashed upon the world. Anyway, then Thor kills Hymir with his hammer. In the other known story, Thor is challenged to pick up a giant's cat, but cannot, to his embarrassment, only getting it to lift 1 foot off of the ground. Later, Thor is told that this all had been an illusion, and that the cat had in fact been Jormungand, and his picking up the snake as far as he had been a feat of truly terrifying strength. Good one, said Thor. The third major encounter between Thor and the serpent was at Ragnarok. Here, Thor would finally kill the serpent, and he would take 9 steps away from it, and then fall down dead himself. In most versions, he is overcome by the monster's poison at this point, though it has also been proposed that Jormungand knows some variant of the 5-point palm exploding heart technique. The third child of Loki and Angrboda was not a giant talking wolf or a planet-sized snake, no, but mostly very human-looking, albeit normal down one half and blue or pitch black down the other. In more recent depictions, she is often shown as half normal and half hideously scarred when Boss Maroni threw acid in her face, ending her career as Gotham City's district attorney. Her name was Hel, etymologically related to the Christian afterlife of punishment, albeit in this case H-E single hockey stick. She is sometimes called Hela these days, to further distinguish her from the Christian Inferno, and before this movie came out, I was extremely enthusiastic about goth outer space Cate Blanchett, but I had no idea that this would become the single and only thing I would be attracted to for the rest of my life. For all that, though, the Marvel Comics movie does get almost everything wrong about this character. I hope you were all sitting down. The split face is absent, of course, and the mythic Hel is not Thor's sister, but as we have heard, Loki's daughter. And the mythic Hel is, unlike her siblings, really not much of a villain. Like them, she is cast out upon being discovered by the Aesir, in her case to rule the realm that would bear her name. And this was a dismal realm and cheerless. It was the realm where those who had not died in battle were sent. Can you even believe that? Not dying in battle? How dare you? But once she was down there, she pretty much minded her own business. One time, someone went down there to retrieve the dead god Balder from her, and she told them no, and that was mean, maybe, but also her job. She didn't even participate in Ragnarok. A ship called Naglfar sailed forth from her realm, manned by her vengeful dead, but she was not at her helm, at its helm, and her own involvement is not mentioned. This ship, by the way, was made entirely out of the fingernails and toenails of the dead, and for this reason people were directed to clip the fingernails and corpses of the dead before burial, so that they could not be contributed to the ship of the undead, which I guess is a pretty good reason, just not one I would have thought of. There's a bit of a chicken and egg question here as well. Did they decide they needed to trim the nails of the dead and invent Naglfar as a justification for this? Or did they invent Naglfar and then decide to trim the nails of the dead to prevent it? Either way, nothing is really making a whole lot of sense right now. Hell, as a dog, Garm, and he does actually participate. Unlike these others, he doesn't have much of a story beforehand. He is the guardian of the land of the dead, but otherwise not much is said of him. Though the Poetic Edda does at one point provide a list of the best examples of various things, with Garm as the best of hounds, or as we would put it nowadays, the goodest of boys. But at Ragnarok, his howl signals the beginning of the battle, and he rushes forth onto the field and attacks Tyr, and the two destroy each other. Now, of course, you'll remember Tyr as being intimately connected with Fenrir's story, indeed, the most intimately connected of all of the gods. But here at the end, Odin hogs Fenrir for himself, leaving Tyr with a dog as his consolation prize, because Ragnarok is the death of the very gods themselves, and also totally no fair. Nidhogg, the dragon who gnaws forever at the roots of the world tree that connects the 9 realms of Norse cosmology, is also present at Ragnarok, seen with corpses in his jaws flying through the air, which doesn't really accomplish anything, but which is the most metal thing in all of Norse mythology, and therefore the most metal thing that it is even possible to conceive of. Anyway, here's Idris Elba, who is also in the Thor movies. But lest we imagine that apocalypses are exclusively the purvey of the West, let's look at some others. The Aztecs liked ends of the world so well that they had 5 of them, which was unusual because the Aztecs are otherwise depicted as a very cheery, upbeat people. They believed that the universe was cyclical, living and dying and living again, as so many things in nature do, and that the current universe was the 5th sun, the subsequent universe as being defined by their suns, the sun being the center of the universe. Cyclical life, the importance of the sun, this all was a pretty excellent view of the world, and lest we mire ourselves in a lot of racist, they were more connected to the land crap, you have to understand that the Aztecs' very urban capital city, Tenochtitlan, had at the time of its fall a larger population than Paris did right then. These were city people. There aren't a lot of jokes in this section because you just need to understand that the Aztecs were cool. And so were their descriptions of the various suns. The first world had been populated by giants, and its sun was Tezcatlipoca, who was the god of, among other things, nighttime, which made him a strong choice for the sun, and indeed he was bad at it. Things were dark. Well, the god Quetzalcoatl wasn't into this. You've probably heard of Quetzalcoatl. He's the famous feathered serpent god, often regarded in the modern day as one of the gentler Aztec gods. Here he is just straight up eating a dude, and here he is again. I'm also going to add that Quetzalcoatl is the closest the human imagination has ever come to what we now understand a lot of theropod dinosaurs look like. Does this mean that the Aztecs had access to dinosaurs? No. Come on. What's the matter with you? Anyway, Quetzalcoatl was not okay with Tezcatlipoca's substandard sun being, so he just knocked the sun out of the sky with a stone club. This made Tezcatlipoca so unhappy that he let loose his jaguars to eat all the people who were, again, giants. Friends, my friends, I love Armageddon and Ragnarok as stories. They're huge and chaotic and very, very busy, and that's great. But for real, a feathered serpent knocks the crappy sun out of the sky with a stone club, and then all of the people who are giants are eaten by jaguars. It's elegant in its simplicity. It does so much with so little. Quetzalcoatl then became the second sun, and the gods created normal-sized humans this time. But these humans became debased and disrespectful, and so Tezcatlipoca turned them into monkeys. Quetzalcoatl didn't care for this, so he wiped them all out with a hurricane. He was a wind god, among other things. Second apocalypse then, everybody becomes monkeys, and then they are wiped out by a hurricane. Batting 1,000 so far. The third son was Tlaloc, the rain god, and shortly after he got started, Tezcatlipoca slept with Tlaloc's wife, because, as we have seen, Tezcatlipoca was a person you didn't want around, but he kept hearing about your parties somehow and came anyway. This sent Tlaloc into a sulk, and he refused to create rain, and the new humans of this world prayed and prayed for him to do so, until he got so annoyed with this that he made it rain fire, because that would teach them, or rather, kill them. Apocalypse number 3, Rain of Fire, from a rain god sulking about his domestic life. The Aztecs were so good at this. Son number 4 was Tlaloc's new wife, Chalchiuhtlicue, a very kind goddess, whom Tezcatlipoca nevertheless accused of only faking to be kind so that people would like her, because sometimes the Aztec gods, much like the European ones, were sort of a giant high school. This upset her so much that she cried tears of blood for 52 years, this being a standard Aztec measure of time, kind of like a century to us. And so the earth was entirely flooded with blood, and humans became fish to survive. Fish that swam in blood. It's just all so wonderful. Which brings us to the fifth sun, the one we live beneath. This one is the war god, Huitzilopochtli, who needs human blood to remain strong, and hence all the human sacrifice for which the Aztecs were so well known. And he needed to remain strong because, well, the stars at night. The Aztecs understood them to be luminescent creatures, hanging still in the sky, far away. They were called the Tzitzimime, and they were skeletal female horrors. They were associated with Coyolxauhqui, the goddess of the moon, as well as with Itzpapalotl, a skeletal destruction goddess with butterfly wings that were lined with sacrificial flint knives, and the Aztecs may seem hardcore to us, but they lived in the scariest universe anyone has ever imagined. The stars themselves were demons that wanted to kill the sun. When there was an eclipse, you could see them around it trying to destroy it. And the day would one day come when the sun wouldn't get enough blood, and the Tzitzimime would overcome it, and so too would they descend to the earth and kill us all. In this it was said that they would be reminiscent of spiders, descending as if on a web, slowly and upside down. So anyway, I understand you have some problems. Now, one thing in common between the Norse and the Aztecs is that everything we know about their beliefs, we know via Christianity, the Scandinavian Eddas and the Mesoamerican codices, written or translated by monks or missionaries. And so it has been suggested that the Christian fixation on apocalypse has influenced our understanding of these cultures. But even if this is so, Ragnarok and the end of the fifth sun are stories entirely their own, and even if they were less important to their tellers, then we are made to think they are handily equal, if not superior, to the book of Revelations in terms of how good they would look painted on the side of a van. Other end times are less utterly horrifying, but no less picturesque. The Juruna people of the Brazilian Xingu River Basin spoke of Sina, who was born after his human mother was seduced by a giant jaguar. How this seduction is pulled off is not recorded. One hopes it was the long game, the classy kind. A woman and a giant jaguar meet for dinner, some light banter, a little candlelight, and then later, who knows? And so Sina was half human and half giant jaguar, born with an ancient and wizened appearance, and with his eyes on the back of his head, because human/giant jaguar genetics is admittedly a bit of a mess. He was said to take his skin off like a shirt when he bathed, which is certainly impressive, but maybe the skin is actually the part you want to clean. The muscles and so on are probably fine. And the end of the world would one day come when Sina removed the huge forked pole that held up the sky. And then presumably the sky just falls down and flattens everything. Perhaps the most anticlimactic of all apocalypses. Still, final judgment often involved the sky. Here, the Tsitsimime, the Norse wolves, and Revelations is alive with fire from the sky, most likely meaning meteor showers. The Pawnee of the southern Great Plains also believe the world ends in meteor showers. This after a great bison who lives in the northwestern sky loses its last hair, which it loses at the rate of 1 hair per year. So we could find out how much time we have left if someone would just go to the bison in the sky and count every one of its hairs, but nobody does this because, people get busy and we're all very tired. Interestingly, the world has actually more or less ended in fire from the sky before. I speak, of course, of the 6 miles of rock from space that slammed into the Earth 65 million years ago and was the nemesis of the dinosaurs. This created an enormous crater in what is now the Gulf of Mexico, named for a Yucatan town where it was discovered, Chicxulub. And so this name is closely associated with the extinction of the dinosaurs. And even though the extinction of the dinosaurs is literally the worst thing that has ever happened as far as I personally am concerned, I've always kind of wanted to go to Chicxulub and see if they have any t-shirts commemorating weirdly the destruction of the world from the sky. Is this, then, the source of the importance of the sky in so many Armageddons? Sure isn't. It was 65 million years ago. Nobody actually remembers that. Maybe your grandma is pretty old, but probably not that old, really. But Chicxulub does point to something else. It was the end of the world for the dinosaurs, yes. But it was not, in fact, the end of the world. Not really. Here we are. And this is something that we have left out of all of these apocalypses, but that appears in all of them. In the Revelation of St. John, the forces of heaven war against the devil and win, and Jesus rules the world thereafter. And sometimes there are some limitations on this, to be sure. In particular, there's the rapture, the idea that the people who get to survive Armageddon are yoinked out of the world before it all goes down, and everyone else can cram it. I found a pamphlet about the rapture when I was a teenager with a section entitled, What to Do in Case You Miss the Rapture. Maybe you had a dentist's appointment. People get busy. Scheduling is hard. It's a sadly exclusionary idea, the rapture, and has led to terrible movies starring Kirk Cameron, who, by the way, is the proponent of an idea that the existence of bananas proves that the Bible is literally true, and he is obviously a terrible mess, but we're off track here. The point is, after Armageddon, good triumphs over evil. In Ragnarok, the gods are killed, but so too are the monsters, and no new humans arise after it's all over, and so too does Balder, the wisest and kindest and most beautiful of the gods, dead well before Ragnarok, before resurrected afterwards, and a new world begins. And the Aztecs had nothing to say about the 6th sun, but there was nothing special about the 5th. There wasn't some magic number, some final thing. If there had been 5 suns, so too would there be a 6th. After winter must come spring. The end of the world is obviously a bad thing. The world, that's where we keep all of our stuff. Let us hope that it does not end when we're there to see it. Let those bastards in the future handle it. But even a full-scale judgment day, a Ragnarok, a thing where we are all killed by the stars that are demons, it's never really the end. Nothing ever really ends, not without a new beginning. And sometimes the winter is terrible, a nightmare, heartbreak piled upon heartbreak. But every apocalypse will tell you, after winter must come spring. Thank you. That's the talk. Hang on a sec. I've got a new setup, so I got to mess around with things. Anyway, things are falling over. All right, just a second. All right. Hi, everybody. Matt, hi everybody! Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. Yes, this is the 5th of the Reverend Matt's Monster Sciences. Again, there's a donation thing just below. If I would appreciate that. All the money goes back into Monster Science. Or if you have my email, you can use my email on PayPal or Matthew Kesson on Venmo. I'm putting these on my YouTube channel now, my Matthew Kesson YouTube channel. The first 2 are up. I'm putting one up every Monday, so you can watch them and spread them to your friends and spread the word. But yeah, let people know. I'd love for people to see this. I work very hard. I think they're fun. Let's see what else is going on. Next week I'm doing my most popular show in terms of people actually physically coming to it at one time, which was a show that I did at Convergence 2019 called How to Remake a Monster. That's next week. Week after that is the first ever show that I self-produced called The 10 Best Dinosaurs. So that's what's coming up. And keep up online, RevMattsMonsterScience.com, and I'm on all of the major social media things. So I might be putting a poll on Facebook up pretty soon. So now it's time for the Q&A. Does anyone have any questions? Let's see. No, you're talking about stuff. Then why didn't they? Okay. Question time. Thank you, everybody. Yes, dinosaurs are coming up in 2 weeks. Yeah, it's been a long time. I haven't talked about dinosaurs yet. This is my 5th week. There's been no dinosaur one. It's a coming. Is the second Aztec sun an allegory for high school? It sounds like high school. I think I remember the thing with everyone turning into monkeys. It's high school, right? I mean, that's the thing. That's one of the things that the Aztecs have in common. The thing about the Aztecs is that they're tricky. Is that because on the one hand, they ought to be, and to some degree are, an urbanized society that arose completely separately from the Eurasian and African urbanized societies. I mean, as different as the East, East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet. There was still a Silk Road back in the olden days. There was cross-pollination. The Aztecs built cities based on stuff they made up completely separately. The unfortunate downside of that is that they were then, we are told about them by Christian missionaries, and so that's going to be a bit of a mess. So, it's hard to say where one thing is influential and the other thing is not. But the thing is, like so many of the pantheon gods of the pagan mythoi, they're petty and cruel and mess around with each other and are mad about humans, although the Old Testament God and the Revelations God are also extremely mad about humans. So in a way, all gods are symbolic of high school, if you ask me. Please, Nissa wants to know more about. Thank you, J Money the Hawk. Please tell me more about Kirk Cameron and the bananas. Jenny Young, just a comment, as a Jesus lover, perfect recap of Revelation, and also I'm totally going to proclaim Jesus' sacrifice to be so that we can have kebabs. Yeah, I mean, I'm here for religious instruction. Okay, I'm going to come back. Nissa, I'm going to come back to you. I'm just going to get a few of the quicker questions as they come up. I love that ending. Do we have any Norse stories that aren't through a mass Christianity? No. The Eddas are all written by monks and people. All of the written stuff is. We have like pictures of wolves and giant serpents and stuff, and we're like, I bet this is Jormungand, but we don't even really know. Archaeology is separate from the Eddas. So, and there's this stuff, like there's this bananas thing where Nidhogg, the dragon that gnaws at there's Nidhogg who gnaws at the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree, and then there's a giant eagle at the top of the world tree. And then there's a squirrel named Ratatosk who runs between the eagle and Nidhogg, telling them each that the other one had said terrible things about them and making each of them angry. And this is what the squirrel does: is throw shade between Nidhogg and the giant eagle, which is one of my favorite myths in the whole world. But the reason I bring it up is that nobody knows what the name of the giant eagle is. The squirrel has a name. We don't have a name for the giant eagle, and this is because stuff is lost. And that's that. Yes, we have archaeology and carvings, but no full writings. Let's see. Okay, hold on. Hold on. I have a lot of trouble with this interface sometimes, and I apologize. Okay, I'm just going to do Nissa's thing right now. Kirk Cameron and the bananas. Kirk Cameron is a Christian of the really weird variety, and he is. It's not his own idea, but there's another Christian of the really weird variety who believes that the fact that bananas fit very well in our hands with the grooves in them, and then you can peel them easily and eat a delicious thing, proves that the Bible is true. And obviously there are some steps missing. Not only does the Bible not really say anything about bananas, but also bananas, as we understand them, are not the fruit that occurs in the wild. We have bred them to be better for us. So this is actually a historical event that bananas are convenient. One, two, well, that's already like two. Three, the degree to which bananas are convenient in nature is so that monkeys and crap will eat them and spread their seeds. This is in fact functional evolution. And 12, also there are some fruits that are not extremely convenient. There's watermelons and stuff. But anyway, okay. So that's Kirk Cameron and the bananas. It is nuts. Let me see if I can make this damn thing work. Hold on. That's a little better. Okay. Okay, here we go. Can I find ways to slip pictures of Idris Elba into all of my shows? I already, as you may have noticed, slipped pictures of Cate Blanchett into all of my shows, and so that does seem only fair. Yeah, absolutely. With the modern trend of nuclear warfare as apocalypse, something else happens. Do you have a favorite after the bomb sort of story? Well, and that's actually interesting. When I first started writing this, it was going to be some mythological ones and then some modern apocalypses, nuclear apocalypses, and zombie apocalypses. But I ran out of room. So I might actually, if people want, and let me know if you do a sequel to this, Better Armageddons Than This, Part 2, The Cinematic Years. And when we're talking about those, I'm a Planet of the Apes man. I have a whole hour-long show about Planet of the Apes, which perhaps I will read here sometime. So that is the answer to that. Let's see. Okay. So here's the thing. I love you, but every time somebody comments afresh, I have to start scanning. I have to start scrolling up. Everybody stop commenting for just 1 second here. Because I can't follow. Okay, thank you. Are there any creatures from the apocalypse you'd love to see in Dungeons and Dragons? They kind of all are there, I mean, I'm first edition, and Deities and Demigods has Fenrir and Jormungand and all that stuff. So I don't know if any of them has the... No, one of them has the Tsitsi Mime. It has a really weird version of the Tsitsi Mime. As far as specific apocalypse creatures, the Tsitsi Mime are my favorite. But yeah, they've never really been done justice as far as I'm concerned. I was actually thinking about the Tsitsi Mime, and that gave me the idea for this show. I was like, oh, that's a better apocalypse than the one we're having. Aha! So that's that. Is there a book or video or website you'd recommend checking out to learn more about Aztec myths? The huge forked pole that holds up the sky is something I just learned about today, and I feel like I need to know a lot more about it as soon as humanly possible. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. I need you to go to my Facebook, Reverend Monster Science on Facebook, tomorrow, and I will throw up a little bibliography. I can't really remember it off the top of my head, but I have a bunch of books on the Aztecs, and some of them are gooder than others. Any plans to explore Satan and the devil in particular? Did you already do that show and I just missed it? Love from Seattle. Oh, thanks, Seattle. I do have a show about Satan, Sympathy for the Devil, it's called. I've done it a couple of times, and I probably will do it. It's one of the ones that I'm actually rather proud of, and I probably will do it before too long on this very Twitch channel. So yes, that'll come up. Okay, let me see what's going on here. Let's see. Somebody says Norse paganism. I've got to figure out a different way to do this, my friends, because I scan up to see everything, and then whenever anyone comments, it ruins everything. So Norse paganism was much more tolerated in Iceland and mainland Europe, Scandinavia, the British Islands. So there is some hope that what we have is pretty good. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, there are some steps missing where Kirk Cameron is involved. Yes. Let's see. Snorri Snorgelson, says Starless, wrote down the prose at 102 years after Christianity became the norm in Scandinavia. If I recall correctly, my scan suddenly messes up. They got kind of embarrassed about their theology and the conversion was relatively slow. Eventually, Snorri decided that no one would get cool cultural references if no one wrote down the Poetic Edda, so they wrote it. Let's see. Some people would like the part 2. That's good. Keep telling me that, and maybe I'll do it. Let's see. The Hopi and Pueblo legends that are super similar to Aztec apocalyptic monsters, especially with horned serpent like Quetzalcoatl. Yes, the horned serpent is a very common motif throughout North America. You know, all of the various nations have very different cultures, but much as in Europe, there's dragons all over the place. Horned water serpents are a very big thing in many different indigenous nations. Let's see. People saying nice things about my devil show. That's very nice. Any chance of it elsewhere with those of us with no FB? Any chance of what? Well, maybe look at my revmatsmonsterscience.com. I will put it up there. I assume you mean the poll about what to do or other stuff like that. And this will open for me again. I would like that very much. A literary better Armageddon, Alas Babylon, War Day, Nature's End, The Stand, etc. Not a lot of but not a lot of monsters in those. There's a lot of Armageddons, but you know, The Stand is dying people as far as I know. I'm not a big Stephen King man. I'm sorry. I'm really super sorry. People say nice things about the Devil Show. Okay, so I am now caught up with questions. Please give me some more if you have them, and if not, then we will get on with our lives. Anyone? Any questions? All right. Looks like, oh, here we go. Unxila Tanka is the Dakota horned serpent. Yes, it's super neat how that happens. The Ojibwe and Dakota do have apocalypse scenarios, but no fun monsters. And that's the thing. Well, you know, religions describe almost all the time the beginning, the creation. That's almost always part of the thing. And as such, the end is also very common. But much of the time, it's just the end. It's just everything goes back to chaos. There's no monsters and craziness. And so that's a thing that happens. So the world tree might be Odin's steed because he once pinned himself to the tree to gain wisdom. So if you don't have the collective memory of those stories, the poems become incomprehensible. Let's see. Some more things. Whoa. Okay, people coming in. Oh, you're welcome, Sleepy Kitten. If you had to live through any apocalypse, which would you choose and why? You know, one thing I just think that CCM made just the stars are going to kill us is just one of the most amazing concepts I've ever heard in my life, and also they kill. I mean, everything else. Like in Revelations, a third of people are killed, or 144,000 people are killed, and it's just these giant swaths and very impersonal. And Ragnarok is just the gods and the monsters fighting, and the humans are killed as a sideshow, as an afterthought. The Tsutsumi may come and murder you, and I don't know. I like that kind of personal attention. Let's see. The squirrel and the eagle aren't in Ragnarok. What are they doing then? Having tea? Does Ragnarok affect other realms? Yeah, I mean, I think it kills everything. It destroys the whole kit and caboodle. But you know, it doesn't. Yeah, the squirrel and the eagle aren't there. There's a lot of stuff that isn't. There's a lot of stuff that happens in Norse mythology that does not then get name called in Ragnarok, which is showbiz sometimes. A Stephen King monster show would be fun. It could happen. Could happen, unless you count Europeans and Black Snake, the lead of capitalism. There are no monsters for end times. Yes, exactly. If you had to pick the most epic apocalypse to meet your demise, what would you pick? Yes, again, the Tsutsumi. So yeah, that's my favorite. I'll give you another minute or so to come up with more questions. Thanks very much. This was a fun one. I really like this one. I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Anything else? I had a new camera and some new lighting, and I hope it was good. When writing this, how much metal did you listen to? All of it. Nice tie. You were beautiful. That. Thank you very much. I don't understand. New camera and lighting is good, says someone. The lighting is great. Good. I'm glad. I think it's a little better, and it helps so much better. Good. Okay, good. I'm glad it's working. Cool. What dinosaurs do you have hanging out behind you? It's not dinosaurs. Over here, it's actually here. I can. No, I'm not gonna. That's. Oh, this is prehistoric mammals. There's a mammoth and a saber-toothed tiger and a woolly rhino and a Dimetrodon, which is not a dinosaur at all, but a pre-mammal, and stuff like that. An Ambelodon and other things like that. So that's what's hanging out behind over there. Well, thanks so much. Good. Okay, good. I'm super glad the video was good. And I'm going to call that good. Thank you so much. See you next Thursday at 8 for how to remake a monster. That's right. I have all this written down. Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening. Oh, real quick, might you do a Lovecraftian show? The original concepts and the other creatures that kind of developed off of it. Yes, I have a Lovecraft show. I'll do it here. I've done it before. It's great. Thank you all so much. Good night.